President Biden stepped onto the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc today, calling on the world to defend democracy, just as Western forces did 80 years ago. As Allied forces stormed Normandy on D-Day, U.S. Army Rangers scaled the treacherous 100-foot cliff along Omaha Beach in the face of Nazi gunfire. It was a feat so hazardous and so difficult, military historians later would say anybody would be a fool to try this. But the 225 Rangers that day did. 77 of them died trying. The rest made it to the top and defeated the Nazi gunners who were firing at them. It is a place of remarkable bravery and heroism, a place where Joe Biden spoke today and invoked Ronald Reagan's infamous speech there 40 years ago about the boys of Pointe du Hoc. Like Reagan, Biden urged Americans to fight against tyranny and for democracy.
American democracy asks the hardest of things, to believe that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. So democracy begins with each of us. It begins when one person decides there's something more important than themselves. When they decide the person they're serving alongside of is someone to look after. When they decide the mission matters more than their life. When they decide that their country matters more than they do.
President Biden highlighted the war in Ukraine while reflecting on D-Day, comparing Russia's assault on Ukraine to the threats European democracy faced during World War II. Just this week, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he's prepared to arm America's enemies if NATO allies continue to arm Ukraine. The warning did little to dissuade President Biden. Before taking the stage at Pointe du Hoc, Biden met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Paris, doubling down on America's commitment to protect Ukrainian sovereignty. President Biden made a public apology to Zelensky for the months-long holdup of American military aid to Ukraine, largely because of Republicans in Congress blocking it. Joining us now is Max Boot, columnist with The Washington Post and author of the upcoming biography, Reagan, His Life and Legend. Max, it's so great to have you here. Wow, what a day. Biden clearly tried to align himself with Ronald Reagan's iconic speech at the same spot 40 years ago about the boys of Pointe du Hoc. President Reagan then and President Biden today both made the case for American alliances to fight Russian aggression. How did he do?
I think he did pretty well. I mean, obviously not up to the standards of Ronald Reagan's 1984 speech, which was one of the great iconic speeches given by any president in the post-war era. And that's something that Biden could not match. Even on his best days, he was not the same kind of orator and communicator that Ronald Reagan was. But I think he was still pretty effective today in paying tribute to the men who took the cliff at Pointe du Hoc, a dwindling number, of course. Far fewer there today than were there 40 years ago for the Reagan speech. And I think what was most powerful about what Biden said was the very intended echo of Reagan's remarks, because it's an indication of how history operates in unexpected ways. Because in the 1980s, Joe Biden was not a fan of Ronald Reagan. I mean, Joe Biden was a Democrat, Reagan was a Republican. Obviously, they had a lot of differences. But, today, Biden was really channeling and paying tribute to Ronald Reagan because he was recalling a time when a Republican president like Reagan was a staunch supporter of NATO and the Atlantic Alliance, and drawing the implicit contrast with Trump and a lot of the MAGA Republicans today who are trashing NATO and trying to break up the transatlantic alliance. And obviously, Biden is trying to associate himself with that bipartisan tradition of internationalism in U.S. foreign policy, which is now
I think Biden
under attack.
Biden is essentially arguing he's more like Reagan than the current leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump.
Exactly. And certainly I think he has a good case to make on foreign policy, because Biden really is following the same kind of Atlanticist, internationalist foreign policy that Reagan was, whereas Donald Trump is a neo-isolationist. His slogan is America First, which was the slogan of the isolationists of the pre-World War II period. And of course, Reagan in '84, Biden today used almost like identical language to warn against a return to isolationism. And I'm sure Reagan could have never imagined that his own party would be heading in that direction.
Yeah. Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.